Hi, I'm Sarah Novotny.
I'm Elliot Halverson.
I'm Jinbai Shi.
And this is our presentation on trust, fairness, and justice in the organization. So I'll start a little bit with trust. I'm going to start with a little bit of a story that will give you a little bit of insight on trust. So a little girl and her father were crossing a bridge. The father was a little bit scared, so he asked his daughter, "Sweetheart, please hold my hand so that you don't fall into the river." The little girl said, "No, Dad, you hold my hand." And he said, "What's the difference?" as he was very puzzled. And she said, "There's a big difference. If I hold your hand and something happens to me, chances are that I may let your hand go. But if you hold my hand, I know for sure that no matter what happens, you will never let my hand go." So I thought that, as cheesy as it may sound, I thought that did a really good job of showing how much trust people put in each other, and especially in the organization when kind of guiding people through when you're working together in projects. So trust can be pretty difficult to define because it's so intangible, and there can be many definitions of trust. A few, the belief in the integrity, character, and ability of a leader, reciprocal faith in one's intentions and behaviors, and a confident reliance on the integrity, honesty, or justice of another. So not only are there a ton of definitions of trust, and trust is a little bit different in everybody's personal lives and in everybody's organizational lives as well, there's also many different types of trust. So there can be basic trust, which doesn't require much thought or reflection, just kind of sitting next to a person, just a basic trust with them. You don't really have to think about it. Simple trust is based on familiarity, but still doesn't require much thought or reflection. Blind trust is where a person refuses to consider evidence of distrust. So maybe the trust was broken at some point, or someone did something to you in the organization, but you kind of ignore those facts and refuse to consider them. And then there's authentic trust, which is reflective and honest. So kind of your true trust between friendships or your coworkers. So basically, the big question is why people should trust. And I think a lot of it begins with instinct. So if you think back to like when people were hunters and gatherers, and people relied on the hunters to get food and the gatherers to get food and then to be able to share. So there was a lot of trust and just kind of evolved from that. It can also be from a fear of punishment, of not doing what is expected of you. Also, achieving self-interest or trusting can demonstrate empathy and kind of identifying with other people and just friendships in general. And then some people just genuinely want to trust. You always hear people say, "I'm just such a trusting person." So some people are just predisposed to being very trustful. There's also many factors that determine organizational trust. The characteristics of the trustor, the characteristics of the trustee, and the perceived risk of the trusting relationship. So the characteristics of the trustor, some people are just naturally more trusting than others, kind of like I said, the predisposed ability to trust. And then the characteristics of the trustee can be kind of assessed on 3 different elements. That's their ability, so the competence that the trustee possesses in a particular situation. So if you're in a workplace and working on a project, kind of the competence that that person has with regards to that project could factor into their ability to be trusted if you're dealing on the same project. Benevolence, the willingness of the trustee to do good for the trusters, so you're relying on the person wants to do good and wants to be a trusting person. And then integrity, whether the trustee has a core set of values that guide their behavior. And then the perceived risk is just how you assess the different characteristics of the trustor and the trustee, and whether the situation could end favorably or unfavorably. So the Mayer, Davis, and Sherman model of organizational trust has found high correlations between that trust propensity, trustworthiness, and trust between both parties. Some benefits of organizational trust. High levels of trust tend to produce high-quality products and services at less cost because they can recruit and retain highly motivated employees. And these employees are most likely to exhibit that organizational citizenship behavior. The most beneficial organizational trust exists through the organization at all levels. So your top executives and your front line, there has to be that pervasive trust through the entire organization. And also, good organizational trust is reciprocal. So you can't just have one side of the party that's in a trusting relationship. It has to be the entire organization, and it has to go both ways. So not only are there so many benefits to organizational trust, there's also a lot of barriers because we are humans and trusting is not always an easy thing to do. So an organization's employees' policies and practices in general could be a barrier. So this means that employees could have their own personal agendas, such as a need for power and recognition that doesn't necessarily align with the organization's goals. So also, I guess another barrier could be if an employee has a tendency towards vengeance or revenge. If you throw them under the bus during a meeting, you know, that trusting relationship could be broken if they tend to have a vengeful behavior. Those who are incompetent or perceive their employees as incompetent does not breed a good trusting environment. And then organizations with inflexible or inconsistent organizational policies or standards is a very big barrier to organizational trust. High trust cultures are more susceptible to continuous change and improvement, which we've talked a lot about companies changing and how they deal with change. So if there is a trust culture and environment, these changes will be much easier to deal with. So that's kind of trust in a nutshell. Trust goes very hand in hand with fairness and justice. So hand it over to Elliot, who's going to talk to us a little bit about that.
All right, so justice defines the very essence of an individual's relationship to employers, while injustice is hurtful to individuals and harmful to organizations. To determine the organizational justice, employees personally evaluate the ethical and moral standing of managerial conduct. This evaluation is how the employees judge the behavior of the organization, resulting in the attitude and behavior that the employees exhibit. There are three reasons that justice matters to people: the long-range benefits, the social considerations, and the ethical considerations. The long-range benefits matter because individuals are motivated by monetary and non-monetary benefits that help employers to retain their employees. And the long-term benefits, or if the long-term benefits don't show justice, the employees are more likely to view the organization as unjust, and they're more likely to leave. The social considerations matter because employees want respect and self-esteem builders by the group and not to be put down. This isn't just required by top management. They want the whole group to feel these social considerations and to help build their self-esteem. This gives them a feeling of belongingness to the organizations, and this also means that they're less likely to leave because of the respect and self-esteem builders that the employees and the managers give them. Ethical considerations matter because when one employee sees another employee doing something unethical, they will take more risks to get retribution against the other individuals. It doesn't have to be a direct unethical towards them. As long as they see something that is unethical, it's stated that most employees are going to take the risks to try and get that unethical act eliminated from the organization. Being ethical in an organization is important to all individuals because everyone wants to be treated fair and equal. Nobody wants to be harmed for the benefit of someone else. Along with these three reasons for justice, these are reasons that justice matters to people. There are three types of justice that an organization can use: distributive, procedural, or interactional. Distributive justice focuses on allocation of outcomes and the appropriateness of the allocations. Individual employees want to guarantee that they receive their just share of the potential outcome for the work that they input. The main attributes that make distributions just are equity, equality, and needs. Equity requires rewarding employees based on their contribution, as previously mentioned. Equality requires providing each employee roughly the same compensation, which represents the equality by not being unfair based on the same experience and work requirements. Needs suggest that benefits should be based on the individual's personal requirements. So, example of distributive is that once that you're up for your annual review, you realize that you only get a 1% raise. You don't feel that this is a fair outcome, and equal distributive justice can be effectively used by educating your employees, by communicating, education, and enacting fair employment practices. Procedural justice focuses on means by which outcomes are allocated. This is all about the appropriateness of the allocation process. The main attributes that make the procedures just are consistencies, lack of bias, accuracy, representation of all concerned, correction, and ethics. Consistency requires that all employees be treated the same. With procedures in place, all employees will be treated the same depending on the act on which justice is required. That means that if two people do the same unjust act, that the procedures will require that the same justice be taken. Lack of bias means that no person is singled out for discrimination or ill treatment. Accuracy requires that the decisions are based on accurate information, and that if an error exists, there is a correction process where appeals can be made and fixed. That way, that if there is inaccurate information that is being used to decide what procedure is justice, if there is an error in that procedure, they have the right to appeal and get fair treatment. Also, all appropriate stakeholders need to have an input in the decision, which covers the representation of all concerned attributes. If not all stakeholders have input, then there might be something that is missing that is very important that may later hurt them. The final attribute is ethics, which means that the norms of the professional conduct are not violated and all decisions are considered ethical. So an example of this is when an employer is scheduling overtime, you walk up to the schedule and realize that your name's written on a Saturday, which would mean overtime, and you discover this on Friday evening. Procedural justice would offer that there is enough time given to the employees before scheduling overtime. That way they can plan accordingly.
And actually, procedural justice is one of those things that has been directly correlated to the organizational trust. So.
Yep. So the last one was interactional justice, which focuses on the appropriateness of the treatment that one receives from authority figures. There are two attributes to being interactionally just: interpersonal justice and informational justice. Interpersonal justice is treating employees with dignity, courtesy, and respect, while informational justice is sharing relevant information with employees. The information that is shared should not include rude or cruel remarks. The example that I have for this refers back to the overtime example. After realizing that her overtime, or not the pay raise, the 1% pay raise was not adequate for what she had done throughout the year, she went and talked to the manager, and the manager justified the decision by letting her know that the department is facing major cuts and potential layoffs, and that 1% is the most that they could do. So both of these are important because you want to give the individuals information that is accurate and respectful without hurting them in their dignity. So there are there has been research that states what affects workplace justice. So the first effect on workplace justice is that justice builds trust and commitment. As we just previously discussed, trust is very important in an organization as well as commitment because turnover reduces significantly when employees are committed. The second one that research shows is justice improves job performance in the workplace. When justice is adequately used, job performance will increase because when strong relationships are created with justice, it motivates employees to create higher work performance. The final effect is that justice fosters employee organizational citizenship behaviors. If employees view the organization as being just, they will in turn go beyond their call of duty inside the organization. Many employees tailor their behavior in the organization towards the organization's justice within. And now we will talk about the fairness in the organization.
I think fairness, trust, and justice all affect the work performance for the employees. Fairness is also very important. It means every employee should be under the same standard, under the same judgment. Everyone has to have the same equal chance. In an organization, fairness means managers should not treat somebody better than another employee. The reward and the penalty should have a clear rule on the paper, and also it should be reasonable to understand. I think fairness is a good thing for an organization because it will make the whole organization to be more integrated and work together. I think if an organization is fairness enough, then every employee can feel comfortable and not afraid to make contributions that will not gain the reasonable reward. And people who want to have a free ride and lazy people, they will no longer feel comfortable to stay in this organization because the culture didn't allow them to become a free rider.
So now we're going to do a little skit on trust, fairness, and justice in the organization. Elliot will be playing our manager, and the two of us will be employees working on a project. So.
All right, guys, we got a report that we have to get done by the end of the day today. Can you guys both work on it together?
Sure.
All right, I'll check back in a little bit.
Okay. Hey, so I'm working on the growth rates here and was wondering what you were getting for those. How's it, what are you getting? Have you done much?
Yeah, I think I do a lot.
Well, okay, we have about an hour left, so I'm really trusting you to do your part on this because we have to have this done in an hour, so.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, awesome. We'll get it done.
How's it going? Got about 10 minutes before the report's due. You guys done?
Yeah, we're done.
All right. Looks like you guys did some good work. It looks like because this report was such a tight deadline, we're going to give you time and a half for today. So congratulations, and you guys can take off.
Thank you.
What's wrong?
Well, I did basically that entire report, and he handed in and used it. Well, basically, I did most of the report for the day, and it looked like he was kind of playing computer games. So I was just a little disappointed that he was getting a reward for most of my work. So.
Oh yeah, it does look like he was playing World of Warcraft, and he was on YouTube too. I mean, yeah, I guess the handbook says that if only one person does the work, then we're gonna have to cut the pay for the other person that didn't do the work for the day. So I'll take care of that when he comes back tomorrow. Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you. I really appreciate the fairness there because it means a lot.
All right.
So this unfortunately is a situation that happens quite often where people don't work equally on a project and may, both get rewarded. And I think people have a lot of trouble bringing this up or their managers noticing, especially in large workplaces and between co-workers. So we really just wanted to demonstrate that having that open communication like Elliot talked about a little bit with the justice and having that handbook on fairness in the organization can really kind of mitigate these problems. So yeah, that was a little bit about trust, organization, and justice, and we hope you enjoyed it.